Hello. All right, we'll go ahead and get started for our final session here on rehabilitation. Thank you for joining us. I know we're wrapping up here at the end of a long day. But maybe I'll introduce Taras, who will play a more active role in this last session as a moderator, whereas in the last one we had George do that. And I think it's important to point out our gold sponsor, Ether Biomedical, for being here and presenting yesterday. I think there's a number of topics that are worth discussing from an educational perspective around those types of issues, and Dr. Max Ortiz-Catalan as well, that I think are worth discussing from an education perspective, some of these very important issues around bionics, around scalability from that perspective. So. Taras, I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, thanks a lot. First, I want to get a little bit of an idea of our audience today here. I know we have, I think it's like, I forget, she's a psychiatrist or psychologist sitting with us. And then the three of you, obviously Piotr, we know. And then I know him. And Eric, and what's your specialty, or Prestas? Yeah, okay. And you are an intern in? Oh, in rehab medicine. Okay, good. Rehab specialist. That's
we're doing some quick introductions.
Hi everyone, my name is Annika Chan. I'm Project Management Specialist Rehabilitation and Resilience with the USAID Ukraine Office of Health. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. The gentleman in the red.
Max Ortiz-Catalan, I'm a professor of Bionics.
Professor of Bionics. Okay, and we have the two over here. They were here in the morning. Are you rehab or you're psychology, psychiatry?
Клінічна лікарня психіатрії, клінічний психолог.
Clinical psychologist and clinical hospital, same clinical psychiatric hospital.
We had a lot of questions that we wanted to go over, but I think we should just, let's see if we can start with the rehab with USAID. What? Oh, well, we have the gentleman presented yesterday, and so let me go over some of the questions that we had here. You know, how can the advanced devices be integrated into rehab programs to improve patient outcome? What's the strategies that can be employed to create tailored rehab plans based on individual patient needs and goals? How can VR and augmented reality be utilized to enhance patient engagement and motivation? Can you guys tell us a little bit about those answers?
Yeah, maybe it actually would be helpful to start with the Ether Biomedical guys first.
Okay.
Right, they shared a lot of their experience yesterday from the superhuman's perspective, and Piotr obviously demonstrated the physical capabilities. But I'm sure there's a lot more that you did not get into. Eric, you've seen a lot from your own experience, and you've worked with these guys from your position at Hanger, but I'm sure you've also seen a variety of different things. So maybe you can compare and contrast from some of your own experience on that side.
So read me the first question, because you went through three of them, right?
Yes. How can advanced devices be integrated into rehabilitation programs to improve patient outcome?
Ideally, when you talk advanced devices, you're talking myoelectric devices and elbows, or are you talking outside of that?
All devices.
Well, there was a study out about 1.5 years ago that talked about well-being for patients. And the idea is if the patient gets to buy in earlier, to get to use the prosthesis earlier, they get more well-being, they're happier, they'll wear the prosthesis longer. Patients that got really good OT care got really good prosthetic care, walked through the process of learning how to do it, had more well-being points, if you want to say it. So not just focusing on like picking up a block and moving it from here to there, using both arms, using other parts of their body to help engage them, not just focus on one part of rehab. When a patient goes home from the OT office, they would like to know how to cut their bread or open a door or button their shirt. They want to learn all those things like fold clothes. So you've got to engage the patients a lot sooner. So you can bring ideas from home into the office, a basket, you know, fork and knife, things that they're going to use on a daily basis. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Well, I think we kind of knew what the answer is going to be. I don't know if there's a lot of data on that. Is there? Pass it over there.
Well, maybe just to speak a little bit more on kind of how we are hoping to kind of actualize some of that. USAID has been funding various rehabilitation programs for quite some time, and here in Ukraine. And I think that idea of functionality, of really helping patients have the life they want to have, that it isn't just the clinic setting, and that is very much bringing that high quality, rigorous training to clinicians, to PT, to OT, to working together in an integrated way. And I think you have to have a framework where a good OT values that, their supervisors value that, and they've been trained and supervised and continued and encouraged to do that, and that it doesn't just happen in Lviv. Yeah.
It used to be very linear. Do this, do this, do this, and you don't actually start here and here. You kind of interact both ways.
From my perspective, one of the important sayings that we have within our company, because we all, of course, sell quite a few of these devices in the US and fit many patients there, is that the day you fit the device to the patient, that's not the day the job is done, that's the day the job starts. So that's not the end line, that's really the starting point for the prosthetist, for the OT, for the manufacturer, for everybody involved in this end-to-end process. And we have been visiting a few hospitals in this trip. We were at Feofania, a few hospitals in Lviv, Khmelnytsky, going to go through Vinnytsia, Lutsk, etc., etc. And I think we were a little bit surprised to see that the rehab part and the prosthetic part are quite separate at the moment from at least what we see. Of course, there are some centers like Superhumans and Unbroken that are putting everything under the same sort of same roof, so to speak. But when you look at the state facilities that exist, the rehab and the prosthetics bit is very separated. Rehab is done in one place, prosthetic fitment is done in other place. These two places don't talk to each other. So we need to either figure out at a governmental level on how this collaboration can essentially happen, so it doesn't become a situation of patient checkmarked the rehab process, now goes to prosthetics, checkmarks the prosthetic process, because these are really interlinked things. You cannot separate physical occupational therapy and the prosthetic fitment process. So either it has to happen at a governmental level, or private companies, NGOs have to figure out a way in which we can have these things implemented, not just on a limited spectrum at some of the top line clinics like Superhumans or Unbroken, but actually bring it down to the governmental, state facilities, veterans hospitals, because generally what we have seen is one or the other. Either they have a great prosthetic center with nothing on the rehab side, or they have a great rehab center with nothing on the prosthetic side. But rarely have we seen a situation in the few visits that we have done to, asterisk that statement. Rarely have we seen that both of these things are functioning under the same floor. And that's what we as a company are trying to, let's say, our solution for that, our internal solution for that is to try to invite more prosthetists and OTs from the US to come to Ukraine, both from, not just from a training perspective, but to actually spend some time here and fit patients and train people at the same time. Because what we believe, upper limb prosthetics, I can speak mostly about upper limb. Lower limb is a completely different ball game, but at least when we look at upper limb, it's not something that you can teach to a new person in 2 days of, there you go, this is from today, you are certified to fit hands and you're going to go fit 100 hands. Can't do that in 2 days. It takes weeks and months to get a prosthetist, an occupational therapist really well trained on how to fit upper limb if they have not really done a lot of work in that in the past. So governmental side, private side, NGO side, one of us or all of us together have to find a solution on how we can link these two things at the state facility level, in my opinion. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Piotr. Okay.
I think that could be one of our points that we would want to do a recommendation. As an internist, I've been going to the hospital, but I end up going to the rehab facilities too. And I get confused that they have people in the rehab facilities and they're going somewhere else for prosthetics, way different part of the city. It's just crazy. They have no ride, they have no family. So that's we know what the problem is, but we need to solve the problem. Now, I can't give that because I just come and go, but you being here, do you have a better idea how they could do, especially the state? You know, you got the superhumans, you got the unbroken, yeah, they're going to manage. But all the other ones, which smaller facilities have like 200-300 of them, while I think when I was at Superhumans, there was only 130 of them, even though the facility is 5 times bigger. Do you have an answer how to solve that problem? This is going to be important to write down.
From one perspective, we definitely need to go back and look at the tools that we are using for that. So even in developed economies where we provide these devices, this is not a problem that is a Ukraine-specific problem. This is a global problem that prosthetics and rehabilitation are separated from each other. Yes, it's a little bit better in other countries. More work needs to be done in Ukraine. But one of the key things to focus on here is first of all, making sure that prosthetic manufacturers are not just, because prosthetic manufacturers, even us, we are complicit in that, that we primarily focus on the prosthetist. We train the prosthetist on how to fit the device, don't really give that much attention to OTs and PTs on training them on how the device works. So I think from a prosthetic manufacturer's perspective, we have to, because the occupational therapist is not the key client. The key client from our perspective, if I go back to the business side of it, the key client for us is the prosthetic center, the prosthetic clinic or the prosthetist. The occupational therapist is not the client for me, but if I want my product to succeed, then it is in my best interest to train that occupational therapist on how to, train the patient to fit the device as well. So we definitely need to, this is a step that needs to come from the prosthetic manufacturers, that we actually go to these occupational therapy centers and train them on how the device works and what kinds of settings. You know, with these bionic devices, there are hundreds of different settings and parameters that you can adjust in the software program. But the OT really needs to have that knowledge of how the device works internally to be able to deliver, let's say, effective care. So I would say that's one point. Then second, in terms of solutions, some of the work that we are doing and other manufacturers are doing as well is trying to digitize this journey. Currently, when you look at the tools that are used by these prosthetic clinics, by these occupational therapy centers, they all use their own separate set of tools. Some are paper-based tools, not a lot of it is digitized, etc., etc. With the scale of upper limb amputation that exists in Ukraine, we definitely need to have a hard look at the tools and either collaborate together to build digital tools that allow us to bring these stakeholders onto a same platform and have a digitized tracking of the occupational therapy process and the journey of the patient, instead of different centers following different frameworks with different tools where there is absolutely no centralization of sorts. And yes, there is work that we can do on this, but there would also be requirement of having the regional governments involved in this, the veterans hospitals involved in this, to allow for the implementation of such tools. Because these are not really hard things to build. When you zoom out of prosthetics, look at healthcare overall, so much of healthcare is digitized, right? Like your smart home is digitized. You can turn off your thermostat while you're in Ukraine at your home with a Nest. You can do none of those things with prosthetics. So there is definitely work that needs to be done on tools. It's not some fundamental research work. It's basic components that are missing as part of that digitization process of the patient journey that's not going to be solved by us as a company alone. That has to be a collaborative effort. So those are the 2 points that I would say as solutions on what can be done.
Yeah. I also want to go, just housekeeping. Everybody has their headphones. Anybody needs headphones? Everybody understands what's going on with English Ukraine. But you want to go first?
Yeah, actually, I was hoping to ask Dr. Catalan from your broader experience. Obviously, Drew and Eric have very specific experience from their experience as a company and as a vendor. But Dr. Khan, do you care to comment from your experience as well?
Well, so there are a lot of things that can be done, and we might do well on prioritizing what are the things that are maybe more urgent. In the world in general, there's not many standardized procedures on how to treat patients with amputations. Many countries don't have a standardized way to follow with them. Not even the U.S., for instance, or Europe. And what I've seen is that there's many non-governmental charitable organizations that are trying to do something organized by doctors. They're not expert in prosthetics. There are not many experts on prosthetics in the country. And that's why there's often a disconnect between the prosthetist and the rehab therapist. And that's the two that you've been talking about, but the surgeon is also very important. So in centers where they consider all of these, like the Medical University in Vienna or the Rehab Institute in Chicago, that now is called the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, they have more comprehensive treatment from the surgical part, because that matters how the prosthetist is going to fit the prosthesis, and then the rehabilitation in between, then the fitting of the prosthesis and rehabilitation after. So ideally you want to have, and not even unbroken superhumans have that now. They're trying to add some surgical capabilities, but they don't have that. So what I've seen is many of these very well-intentioned NGOs don't know how to go about. So I think that some guidelines or standardized procedures on what will be the fundamental blocks of treating a person with an amputation should come up from somewhere. I don't know if from this group or the government or ISPO, which I haven't seen them here. I don't know if there's anybody from the International Society for Prosthetics and Orthotics. I haven't seen much of their presence in Ukraine, but that will be the professional organization that normally deals with the education of prosthetists and so on. So that will be at the fundamental level, and then from there, education. There's not enough prosthetists. There's the procedures for the real rehabilitation. All that part is missing, and I think that needs to be some sort of guidelines should be there, at least for people to know that they need to consider those blocks when they're building their clinics, because they want to do that, but they don't know how to do it. And I think there is enough. Unfortunately, there is so many patients in Ukraine that you can have 10, 20 superhuman centers and will still not be enough to properly treat all of them. So I think there's a continuous need for these centers. There will be more. There needs to be more. And there are no basis for them to come to existence and provide proper or a good treatment.
We have over there.
Hello. I would like to go back to the subject you were saying about smaller organizations that are in a business, and I present one of them. We are small, but we have 2 centers in Kyiv and Odessa, and we do prosthesis and rehabilitation. And how do we survive?
Do you mind introducing yourself and the organization?
Yeah, my name is Julia, and I introduce center name is Zdarovia. In English, that's health. So we do prosthesis, we do rehabilitation, and we do special shoes as well. And also as a volunteer, I'm also looking always for some partners, for some partners to work with, because it's not enough just to do rehabilitation and prosthesis. It's also really difficult for guys to get back to the social life. So we take them to the different kinds of sports, we work with different foundations, and of course always looking for some help, because we drive around, we rent apartments for people who is going through the process. And of course, it's really difficult, but as long as we have support from you guys from overseas, lots of friends, thank God, and we will continue to do what we have to do, and thank you very much for being here.
I had a follow-up question that Dhruv and I were chatting about on the way up here, which is just a natural probably tension that exists in terms of the scalability of the issue. There are tens of thousands, some estimate almost 100,000 amputees in the country. And so I think there's a natural tension of what's scalable, right, in terms of prostheses and fittings, knowing that you have to train prosthetists and you have to provide prostheses. And obviously, when we're talking about bionics, we're talking about more expensive equipment. And so how does the scalability of it fit in as something that you're surely thinking about and trying to help? And what are the things that you're trying to balance and the things that you're facing?
Our opinion on this as of now, again, we are just barely starting to work in Ukraine. We have fitted 100 patients. It's a good number, but it's nothing as compared to the scale of the problem that exists. So hard to say, give any response on this from a practical perspective, just from the hypothesis that we have. We believe scale is only going to come, and cost reduction is also going to primarily come by centralization and efficiency. These two things can, because generally speaking, upper limb, we have to go back to the question of why are upper limb devices so expensive, right? Like, we as a manufacturer have some understanding of it, the components and everything is expensive, but why are these devices so expensive anyway in the first place? One of those reasons is that upper extremity population across the globe has generally been a very small segment of amputee population as a whole. 95% plus amputations are lower limb, and that's why, and also upper limb amputation requires a lot of hand holding. So when I look at the US market, for example, we don't have centers where we fit 100 hands, right? We go from one place to another to fit one hand in a clinic in Illinois, another hand in a clinic in Wisconsin, another hand in a clinic in Texas, etc., etc. Per center, the number of devices that are fitted are very small. So there are a lot of costs involved with training so many different people. It's a very decentralized sort of way in which upper limb prosthetics are provided, and all the overhead costs that are associated with that, they add up, and because they add up, they are directly reflected in the price of the product. The price of the product is not purely driven by the COGS over here, but very importantly by the overhead that is associated with providing successful fittings to patients. In Ukraine, this number is completely different, and that's why I believe if there is a place in the world where scalability and cost reduction can come in prosthetics, that is Ukraine right now, specifically talking about upper limb prosthetics. Because of the number of patients that exist, there is potential to have a region-based centralization system where you have a few clinics per region where a significant chunk of these amputees are seen, so that we don't have to spend a lot of money with all the travel, all the marketing, all those kinds of activities. So I think that is going to be a key factor in if we can have regional centers of excellence for upper limb devices instead of 20 clinics fitting 2 hands each per month, because then I have to go and cater to 20 people, and that's going to directly reflect on the costs. If you have one major clinic which is the center of excellence for a particular region where, not just us, multiple manufacturers can have some sort of presence, then that's going to have a huge impact on the cost associated with providing these devices.
Is the rate limiting step the prosthesis, getting the prosthesis and funding, or is it or the amount of rehab, enough rehab facilities to train these patients?
Like right now in Ukraine, I mean, for high functionality devices, the funding is definitely an issue as well. Although they have a regulation by the number 518 that is specifically built for high functionality devices, but that's a long, complex procedure for good reason. Otherwise, everybody would be applying for $100,000 hand, right? But it's a complex procedure right now on what it takes to reimburse such devices. Then you add in the complexity of price control that is implemented into the market, which has its positives and its negatives, both of these things. So there are issues on how the reimbursement process is structured, first of all. And then secondly, there are no big centers which are doing volumes right now for upper limb. There are those centers that are doing volumes for lower limb, but there were not really any upper limb prosthetists in Ukraine, or very few upper limb prosthetists. Eric, I think he trained the first batch of upper limb prosthetists in Ukraine back in 2014, 2015, something like that. That was the first proper upper limb prosthetists that were trained like less than 10 years ago. So if you don't have those upper limb prosthetists, then how can you have centers of excellences with that? But that's what makes the center of excellences bit even more important, because you have limited upper limb prosthetists. You don't want to further go out and spread them. If you have 20 people, you don't want to spread them in a very wide area, which will then require them to travel to multiple places and fit patients and things like that. You want them to be able to spend most of their time at a single place, being able to fit patients. And I'm not talking about single place in the country, but single place in a whatever geographical division makes sense. I don't have an idea of that at the moment. But whatever geographical division makes sense, if you can have that centralization bit, then that should drive the cost down, potentially also reduce the requirements that we have for using these high functionality bills that exist in the reimbursement structure right now, et cetera, et cetera.
Thanks.
I'm wondering, our colleagues at USAID, do you have a general perspective on this, about prosthetics, and specifically, how Bionics and its role?
I can jump a bit on, yeah. Do you have a question?
USAID's approach? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, how do you work, how do you decide what centers you support, or do you have your own centers in general?
So it's, I even don't know where to start, and I want to jump into, because here you discussed a bit on prosthetic and orthotics and education. So, and we have in USAID, Ukraine Office of Health new launch project named Rehabilitation for Ukraine, and which is going to be implemented by Momentum Wheels of Humanity and with the subcontractor Deloitte, and together also with the National Assembly of Persons with Disabilities and Project Hope as well. And so a bit about education of prostheticians and orthoticians. So what is going to happen? We have right now in Ukraine 4 universities, and actually this university should become one of who is going to provide education for master's education for prostheticians or orthoticians. And another one is Ternopil Medical University, National Medical University, Danila Galицko National Medical University in Lviv, and Kharkiv Medical University. And actually Rehabilitation for Ukraine, Rehab for You, is going to support 2 of those universities and to create curriculum and to help to create curriculum focusing on like taking in account European curriculum, because we are moving, this is like answering question, this is more broader and strategic thinking in terms of if we are going to access EU, we need to think. So let's focus on the EU accession and take in account that. And just to how actually those regions is going to be supported, because we know that there is a protest hub and they're supporting different universities, and we're not sure yet, and Momentum are not sure yet what exactly universities will be supported, because again we are coming back to the point that we need to avoid any duplication and be mindful and put our efforts and not to spread like, okay, here is the, let's say, like one donor, UNDP or ECO there, and USAID also there. No, this is really be mindful and put efforts into the different places.
I'm going to pause you there. Could you speak a little bit about coordination, since that is part?
Yeah, this is
kind of like
thank you,
how do we
Megan.
work together?
About the coordination, this is really an issue, and actually we also have this is we called an umbrella grant, and this is called WHO Advancing Rehabilitation 2030, and we're actually USAID is buying in 2 million project for WHO project, and one of the objectives under this is to make an intersectional coordination. And when I'm talking about this, what I mean, this is exactly to coordinate between ministries, and here's where I'm talking about Ministry of Health, Ministry of Social Policy, Ministry of Veterans, and National Health Service of Ukraine. This is one part of coordination. Another part, this is really to coordinate within ministries and donors. And one more within donors, because again, be mindful where we are putting our efforts, and this is now in the way of creating, and will be the chair will be Minister of Health Leshko, Viktor Leshko, and and also and WHO is going to be. They are going to co-chairing this. This is about the coordination.
And I think I'll just speak really broadly for USAID. It is, we often work through these large-scale grants, over 5 years, which means it's not often that individual organizations are getting like a small grant here, a small grant there. Like that's on the humanitarian side, yes. But for these longer-term developments for P&O and physical rehab more generally, a longer-term investment, it's usually a consortium of organizations coming together. What I will say is, and that we balance between the service delivery, but also the system strengthening. How does this get built into Ministry of Health? In some of our other works, projects, it's like, back to digitalization, we've done a lot to develop the e-health system with MOH. So I think one goal of the new project is to just have standardized patient functionality assessments that are part of the digital e-health system, so it can be shared. And so I don't know if that's not exactly how we work, but it's this balance of service and systems. And sitting here, I would say something USAID prioritizes, but probably in health we aren't so good at it compared to agriculture and others, is public-private partnership. How do we partner with companies and have you as in part of these groups? I think that really matters.
So I have two questions here. One is from an observation that we had, and second is a general question. The first thing is, when you talk about this coordination, I think when we talk about this coordination of aid, that's absolutely critical, because we went to a hospital center, which is a rehab hospital for veterans, and we were quite shocked to see that in this rehab hospital for veterans in a particular city, they have the rehab part. They also had probably $250,000 worth of equipment donated to them to build prosthetic devices, and that equipment is collecting dust because there is zero prosthetist and they have absolutely no idea what to do with it, which makes no sense. Like, that's money just going down the drain. So this coordination bit, I think this is like something which has to be fast-tracked. Yeah.
This is just to, and sorry, where is that? Okay. But this is really about, and I would like to bring your attention to back to 2020, when everyone and every donor organization was here, and it was a bit of mess, I would say, because and continuing rehabilitation is a hot topic now, and everyone wants to be and involved. And but again, when the war started and we just were, so Ukraine was receiving an aid, like it was just tremendous numbers. And I worked with them, Doctors Without Borders, and what I saw, they really didn't care what they're bringing and where they're putting these devices. Even if there were no need in that, just sending, because there were no assessments and there was a huge gap. And to avoid that, I think really what USAID Office of Health is trying to do to maintain this coordination and to avoid this. But again, this was a really huge humanitarian crisis, and that's why everyone, yeah.
And the second question that I have on this is that, so we have seen a lot of interest from rehab hospitals who currently rehab upper limb amputees, who are motivated to really bring prosthetic fitment care within their facilities, let's say. So they are rehab hospitals, they do the rehab bed, they have patients, but they also want to start fitting prosthetics. They don't want to send their patients out anymore. They want to fit patients, but they don't have the facility to do that. Is that an area that USAID is interested in or is working towards supporting, as well as empowering these rehab centers to set up in-house prosthetic clinics so that everything can be under the same roof?
So I don't, this is where I'm not a specialist enough. Could you so you're talking about regional rehab hospitals?
This is a very good question, and again, it's about to connect prosthetic, as I understand. Yeah, okay. So, and here, I would like to mention that this is really about strategy of Ministry of Health, and we are aligning with this strategy. And now we have an order, like a law about rehabilitation, and we have multidisciplinary teams, and prosthetists and orthoticians are not the part of this team. So, if we're thinking strategically, ideally, we need to change this. But actually, this is not right now the part of our objective, because we're thinking like we need just now strengthening the multidisciplinary team. But this is very good point. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tata, Hospitalers Medical Battalion. I just had one question regarding the message that you sent that we don't, like in the beginning, right, of the full-scale invasion and maybe up until now, like there is no demand for the equipment as such, but people kept sending it and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I'd like to shed a light on it, like from the different perspective. There is need for the equipment, obviously, but there's also need for, specialists to work on that. And as Dr. Catalan, I hope I pronounced that correctly, rightfully so, commented that we can have 20 superhumans organizations in Ukraine. It still won't be enough, but what superhumans do excellently is that they invite people from the US to come and work as specialists here as using the equipment that, let's say, the US sends to Ukraine. And one of my teammates lost, like, his orthopedic surgeon, and he lost his right arm. And so he went to the US and he received the bionic prosthetic. And but he went to US to receive that bionic from Ukrainian startup company that is based in the US. So I was wondering whether you do, like, obviously we won't solve the issue of not having enough specialists in the upcoming couple of years because it takes time to prepare those people. So do you probably invite people from abroad to come and join, let's say, Unbroken or Superhumans and etc.? I'm sorry if this is like a broad question, and if you have addressed it previously, I just missed the part of the conversation. But, well, in a nutshell, do you encourage people to come and work with Ukrainian?
We have existing, when I say we, USAID funds, for example, Momentum, Wheels for Humanity, to partner with local Ukrainian universities. I think there's 5 focused, for example, on PT, 3 on OT, and I'm not sure for P&O what the plan is in this one. But then it is up to them and the Ukrainian universities and even Momentum. It's an international organization, but mostly staffed by Ukrainians. They come up with a plan, and if that involves bringing in some international expertise or sending out and bringing back, that can be part of it. I wouldn't say that is part of our strategy overall. It is more, how do you build the education of specialists in a way that balances the need for speed, yet also the long-term system of education, which can't rely on international experts. Yeah, and it won't. It's really difficult. It's an impossible question, but there's other.
Yeah, we're going to get through everybody here. I just want to say something about USAID. It's a me from the outside, they're trying to give you have a detailed question. USAID has special functions and protocols which they follow and how they do things. Yes, I mean, the problem you said about the equipment laying in the hospital, they probably have these high hopes that they're going to end up getting to that, which they don't. And the Ukrainian government or the Ministry of Health also should have a hotline that you can call anonymously and says, hey, we got this stuff sitting here. Can you put it where it's supposed to be? But there is no hotline. They got other dumpster fires that they're taking care of. So I think sometimes it's up to us as individuals or individual organizations to try to solve that problem. Because especially not in 2024, maybe in 2026 or 2030, they'll be able to have that. Dr. Catalan.
Sorry. So there was a question on whether you will support the expansion of centers to provide additional service, but there is no specialist to provide such services. So, but what I'm very surprised is that the ISPO is not here. Are you working with ISPO? The International Society for Prosthetics and Orthotics? Because what you don't want to do is reinvent the wheel, right? So if you're setting up an educational program, ISPO has been doing that for forever and in all kind of situations, developing countries, they have, it's a large, I mean, it is the professional association for prosthetics and orthotics, so I'm a bit surprised there's nobody from ISPO here.
ISPO is here in Ukraine, but it's just dormant, and nothing really has been done, but officially ISPO exists in Ukraine.
Okay, yeah. But you're not.
Yeah, I was just going to say that ISPO does officially exist in Ukraine, and they do have a precedent for Ukraine as well. But like nothing has really been done beyond that. But structure-wise, they are here.
What do they do in Ukraine?
As of now, not really anything.
All right.
From what we know.
But you should probably talk to them.
Yeah.
And just to portray that the work that we're doing is not like this current project, it's beyond just P&O. It is a lot more than that, and that's probably a smaller part. So in terms of, knowing the details of that, physical rehab writ large, I can say there is the plan and the value of expanding as, including even at a more basic level, like burns, stroke recovery, all of that, to be more at the regional and ultimately the local level.
So there, do you speak with ISPRM, the International Society for Medical Rehabilitation?
we're the donor organization. This is where our partners are working at that level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those specific, yeah, to reiterate that, they are the donors to another organization, and they're supposed to be on the ground working with the ISPO, if they are working with prosthetics. Yeah, you kind of have to figure out how USAID works to really. Yeah. Yeah, I Googled ISPO. There is a Ukraine, but it's blank. There's nothing going on. Yeah.
So yeah, we are in the market for 7 years, and I never had experience with any organizations that you were guys talking about, but what experience we have is that we sent one of our guys who went through our facility, and he is working as a protesist today. And there is another guy who is also went through, he is a soldier, he went through our facility, he got his prothèse, and now he is working with the other soldiers just like he is and helping them, motivating them. So this is really good that we also give them new profession, because I mean, they have no idea what to do, and this is also like, and they work hard, and they are really amazing, and they know exactly what the other guy is going through. This is a really cool thing, and I adore with the whole of my heart that thing that it's possible to help this way as well.
So we were talking earlier about the Ministry of Health. And they should have been here. Somebody from that should have been here at this meeting, because the house is on fire now. We've got 100,000 plus amputees, 30% of them are upper limb. There's not enough clinicians. Somebody has to get the government involved to solve that. If it's providing funds and bring training in, there's schools starting, but that's a 5-year process. 5 years, I don't know where we're going to be. But it's right now. It's got to happen now. And there's not enough upper limb clinicians worldwide, because we don't see hundreds of thousands of amputees in our lifetime. It's very specialized. So it's got to be a track to get there.
And I'd just say 100% on the coordination issue as well with government, because it is not only Ministry of Health, it's Ministry of Social Policy, it's Veterans Affairs. This is such a cross-cutting issue. It makes it really challenging.
So good point, and we did invite the Ministry of Health, and exactly as Megan was describing as well, it cuts across so many different areas, and it shouldn't just be the ownership and domain of a single ministry. It's not just Ministry of Health, but Ministry of Veterans Affairs and so many other ones. So completely agree, and it's hopefully with forums like this that we continue to make noise and collaborate together to bring them into these kinds of loops and these kinds of conversations. So thank you for the point. It's absolutely a critical one. Dr. Catalan, coming back to you. You have experience certainly prior to Ukraine. I'm just wondering if that experience prior to the last few years might be relevant in some observations that you've had just from your prior experience, and how that might relate.
So for whoever doesn't know me, I work with osseointegration. It's when you put a titanium implant in some bones, and I develop a system where we can also implant electrodes to provide control and sensor feedback, and we do a lot of surgical reconstruction. So potentially the most sophisticated prosthetic system in the world today, but we only implanted it in 7 patients in Sweden and a couple in the US. And this has been going on for 10 years. So this technology is very good for function, but it's very difficult to implement. It's very expensive. It requires a specialized surgery, specialized implants, and a considerable, the rehabilitation that has to be on point. And also, I don't think it's applicable for patients that planning to come back to the front line. So my work on prosthetic has been somewhere at the at the top of the, the sophisticated things, which is maybe not the most suitable for Ukraine at the moment. So you have a range of options for multi-articulated hands that they tend to call them bionic. That apparently that became the name of multi-articulated hands in Ukraine. To body power and more simple prosthetic devices. And by you just looking at the numbers, it's going to be very difficult to provide these most sophisticated prosthetic devices to everyone. And not everybody needs those. So if you're doing heavy duty work, farming, or a job that requires you to put a lot of load on the prosthesis, a fancy multi-articulated prosthesis is not going to work. So to me, there are some centers that are doing that kind of work. There's a hospital here where I'm volunteering. It's called the Center for Complex Endoprosthesis, Osseointegration, and Bionics. I told them they need a more marketable name. But they do osseointegration, and they fit some top of the line prosthetic devices for a small number of patients. And for them to scale is going to be maybe a bit difficult. But even them who are following some of the most sophisticated technologies, they don't have a good sense of the whole rehabilitation process that needs to be followed. So I think if something will come out of this is a suggestion or a work group or something to set up that standard roadmap of what is it a clinic that's seeing patients with amputation should have or consider. And if they don't have it in-house, they need to have partners to send those patients to those other stages of the rehabilitation. So that's at the bottom of the, or I would say that at the high priority. And then, but actually, if we can just do that, that'll be great. Regardless of how sophisticated the devices are later.
I was kind of wondering about like Titanovi. I was at Titanovi. How's the screening process of picking the patients working out, and how do you decide who gets it, who does not? Besides, if somebody shows up and has the funds to pay for it.
I don't know. So I just joined them recently, and my work there is mostly on post-amputation pain. But my understanding is that they're mostly supporting veterans. Sometimes they take some civilians if they feel like nobody else is going to help them, and they look at the needs. If it's a high amputation, if it's a very short residual limb, they will go for osseointegration, which is the primary indication for having the implant, because it's very hard to have a socket fit.
Yeah, I think the question's not necessarily the details of who gets picked, but how do you decide to make?
Yeah.
So there's a committee that decides.
No, they have a medical director, and there's a organizational director, and between them they look at the patients and decide.
Yeah, is there a rubric that they use to evaluate?
I have no idea.
This problem, obviously this is a problem for the countrywide problem, and other countries throughout the ages probably have had this. Back to USAID. My question is in the past, I'm sure previous issues, how do you engage the government? So you have these smaller, NGOs or private, and and they see all these problems, and they want it solved, but it's way above their level of, I don't want to even say expertise. Doesn't take that much expertise to know there's equipment sitting there that's not being used. But is there ways that the USAID history of how do you engage the government? What's the best way besides, there is no hotline to call them and says, hey, we got to do that. Is there any experience like that where, do you understand my question? So,
engaging government on setting, on what? Because there's so many aspects of that. So, I mean, all of it is true.
The problem is organizing equipment. How
I think, and I'll speak here to Ukraine, that, and I am not a rehab or P&O specialist by any means,
This is not-
because
this
this
is
is
not-
a smaller field, right? I'll speak in broader terms. We have experience of working with governments, say on supply chain for medications. We work with them here on that supply chain and transparent ordering of that's SafeMed is our program of building the capacity through the health information system is something we'll often work with them with. Setting clinical guidelines, that's probably not our lane. So that's sort of not answering, but like we have that experience. I would say, speaking of mental health, and especially because Ukraine is still more in the crisis stage, there's the UN cluster system. You know, there's the health cluster, there's the education cluster, there's the mental health and psychosocial support technical working group. Back to like, this is the hot new field. The MHPSS technical working group, I think has like over 300 members. Good luck trying to coordinate that. You know, it's hard right now. It's like a blessing and a curse, I think, to have so many people interested in what are too often overlooked areas of rehab, P&O, and mental health.
I guess the best way to ask that is, how do we get to the government in the sense of getting a recommendation they'll listen? So joining the cluster, individually, organization.
Yeah, regarding the rehabilitation, so there is definitely cluster WHO, which is led by WHO, and I've been visiting those meetings, and there are donors, and it was like monthly or bi-monthly, and so every donor who is present in Ukraine, they were giving on an overview what they're doing. But coming back to the engagement of government of Ukraine, if we're just going down to the implementing partner, and I will be speaking about rehabilitation for Ukraine particularly. So what is going to happen? They're going to choose 15 regions where they're going to work, and then they need to collaborate with the health facilities. And here they have to go directly to the director of the facility and do an assessment and identify if there is a gap and they need to establish assistive technology units or no. And actually that will happen together with the collaboration with the Ministry of Health, because they will direct. So here you need to be, or here it's fine, and the facility will manage by themselves. And here I really wanted to outline then, after the rehabilitation law became in power, and there was one of the requirements to have assistive technology units, and one of the activities of USAID, there's SRSHS, supported establishment of 8 assistive technologies, and of course it was done together with the government of Ukraine, because they had to identify where is the gap and where they need to establish this assistive technology units. So, and this is really the point that implementing partners, and particularly Momentum and NGOs, particularly Momentum Wheels of Humanity and the team of Momentum Wheels of Humanity, that they will collaborate and engage down with the health facilities administration. This is about their work, but of course we will oversee and direct them if we see that this is not the right way to do so. Thank you.
I tell everyone to still go to your cluster meeting, no matter if you want to or not. So yeah, just because you know who's who and you follow up later. It's kind of like
So the answer is go to your cluster, and that may help you, as opposed to we discussed all the problems that are going on, and we walk out of here and don't know what to do next. Wait for the government to organize. But you say go to the cluster and find out, maybe we can find a solution.
Who's doing what? I'm saying
Yeah, who's doing
if
what?
it's getting connected,
Yes.
that's one way to find out who's doing what and where the energy is. So again,
Yeah.
it's not a great answer, and it's maybe not the fastest answer always.
That's a better answer, I think, than we had, whatever, half an hour ago.
Actually, again, WHO cluster under rehabilitation, and I know there is that they will review this, and they will establish some different mechanisms, and they will invite all donors, because this is now on the way of implementation, and this is definitely will happen. So, and there will be a notification for donors to have this meeting and to engage, like to collaborate on this. Thank you.
So I've heard the recommendation to engage with the WHO clusters before, and what I've also heard is that it's hard for a lot of us smaller NGOs, right? Because the WHO, you know, we're talking about the World Health Organization, right? It's they deal with the largest NGOs. I think those are the ones that will have the biggest impact. And so you have a lot of small NGOs that are helping out in many different ways that are not as aligned. Obviously, the WHO cluster is intended to align efforts. And yet, at the same time, there's still a lot of impact created and a lot of impact affected by us smaller NGOs. And so it's not clear whether or not we should try to also join the WHO cluster where our voice may be outweighed, or maybe we just don't have the same footprint as a larger entity that is part of that cluster. And you know, I think there's a little bit of a quandary for us as smaller NGOs. Should we partake? In which case, I don't know that we'll have an impact, or should we find other ways to continue to collaborate, which may or may not be part of that cluster?
And this is, I would turn it to those in the room in terms of what have been the experiences working with government at the local level. Because more and more it is pushed down for there to be like the oblast level mental health plan, someone's tasked with that. So I'd love to hear on a more practical sense. I get it that the national level coordination is hard, but at the regional level, maybe what are some of the experiences in the room?
My understanding is that it's so complicated that's why there's all these NGOs popping up from everywhere. So when we were looking at how to bring funding, even universities, so when we're looking in how to bring funding and so on, I was advised to rather set up a charity to get the job done. So from what I've seen, it's rather complicated, and even the people prefer to do it by themselves. So going back to that question, I'm not sure how useful, practically speaking, is to try to engage the government at a small scale. They probably have a bunch of things to do, but they're also slow, like any government. So the practical approach I've seen trying to solve the problem, the fire on the house, is to set up these ONGs. So there's in Vinica, when I came originally and spent more time, it's a group of doctors. They had a lot of patients with amputations. The incidence of phantom limb pain is quite high, and they try to find solutions, and that's how they got in touch with me, and that's how I ended up here. And they set up their own NGO, and they built their own clinic, and now they're treating patients. So that's what I've seen. So one of the reasons why I ask you how you operate is because I'm not concerned, but wondering about how people get the information they get. Like, how are they advised, by who? Yeah, but that's a bigger problem.
And you mean advised clinically, by who and what standard?
Not necessarily. By the problem itself. Like, for you to set up priorities and you say, well, we're thinking bigger and strategically and so on, but how do you get the information to do that? Because if you're not speaking with the people that are setting up these organizations they're doing it all, it's all voluntary work. It's only a couple of people that maybe get paid, and that's because they're veterans and they kind of needed the job. But ONGs that I've seen is people who, the doctors, they do the regular job, and after hours, they go and run this other clinic, and there's a few problems with that, when if it's only doctors, they're great at treating people, but not the best managers, so things are not, but they also don't have funding. So there are, and like that one, there start popping up, and then there's a prosthetic center there that doesn't have a rehabilitation facility and stuff like that. So I don't know if it will worth conducting or financing a study on the ground, so like somebody that goes around, talks with all these people and kind of builds. I still don't know what is the path of care for a person with an amputation. I don't know if anybody knows here, but it seems like it's very diverse depending on which is the same in most places in the world. But so without that information, I think it's a little bit hard to think strategically and beyond if you don't know what the problem is.
Actually, along those lines, I had a question for Piotr. I know obviously your experience is in Poland rather than here, but how did you apply? How did you, because you were asking the question, like how are people selected? How are people screened? How did you get connected, and why is that the right solution for you versus a previous prosthesis?
Yeah, so as I mentioned on my presentation, I have used many prosthetic devices, all kinds of prosthetic devices, and every type of these devices has pros and cons, of course. But from my perspective, because I didn't mention that, I work also as a cinematographer. I work with cameras on film sets, so this is my main job actually. And personally, I was always searching for a solution which is strong and robust to withstand all this load. For example, when I was working with the handheld cameras, like 20 kilos, but also solutions which are precise, because sometimes I have to operate the systems, changing something. So I was always searching for some kind of compromise between strength and precision, and a lot of different options, a lot of different adjustments for a prosthetic device. So yeah, I was connected with a company by my prosthetist that I was selected as a demanding user, hard case. So that's a person that's complaining a lot and maybe can help with that. So it seems for us it worked quite well so far.
So your selection was based on your job requirements, the needs for the differentiation and pressure, and because of that, your prosthetist was able to refer you. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So then follow-up question for Eric and Drew, as you work with superhumans, do you have a sense of their selection process and criteria?
At Superhumans, there's about a 300 patient wait list. So basically the patients get to a queue, but it could be a year and a half until they're seen. By then, things could be different. But I know for the facts that when they do bring them in, their rehab therapy before, during, and after prosthetic fit is really well done. I mean, the patients are strong. They can put these things on. Some are multi-level amputees walking around all over the place. It's phenomenal. But how they select the patients in the beginning of that, I'm not aware.
Yes, they are very clear about the fact that they have this demand list, so to speak, or like the list of patients. They don't jump around. They follow the queue because they want to do it on a first come first served basis. And then of course any time, so the way that also kinds of answers the question that you were asking about prosthetists coming to Ukraine. So the way we have been working with superhumans is we don't just give them the hand, we actually, every single use hand that has been fitted, it's also fitted by us. So we have invited 15 prosthetists from the US throughout this entire year to go to Superhumans for a 2-week period and actually fit these devices as well, exactly to solve that problem of lack of upper limb specialists. And this has been helpful because now the Superhumans team, actually 2 months ago was the first time when the Superhumans team by themselves started fitting the Zeus hands as well. And that was only possible because guys like Eric and the other folks who have come over, they have had that 7 to 8 months of experience of shadowing them and looking at it. But coming back to your question of the selection process, all the patients that basically are in their waiting list, they do myo testing. So basically check the sites for the muscle signals before they let us know that in the next camp we'll be fitting XYZ patients. And they have an intake form which is primarily dependent on what kind of activities you want to do. What are the functional goals that you want to achieve? Based on the functional goals that you want to achieve, they then make a decision of, is it a patient that should be better fitted for a mechanical device? Is it a patient for a single action hand? Or is it a patient for a multi-articulating hand? So that form, that functionality assessment form is the primary tool that they use to make a decision on which type of device for that particular patient, assuming there are no clinical barriers to fitting a particular type of device, because there can also be clinical barriers that the patient just doesn't has the good enough control over his muscle sites or myocytes to control a myoelectric device effectively, right? In that case, they would have to go to a mechanical device even if the functional form says that multi-articulating is better. So it's a combination of this intake form that has the functional assessment and goal assessment and the clinical evaluation that they do with the myo testing.
As somebody who is not an expert, I'm wondering if you can educate us generally about just the maintenance of the devices over time.
Yeah, so everything's different depending on what you're being fit with. So if you have a below elbow, you've got to deal with the wrist and hand, as well as the batteries and the wires and cables that fit inside. So most hands, arms, go through drastic change from the time of amputation to the time of fit, because they're swollen, there's wound care, there's a lot of things that go on. So the socket is custom made to that patient, and as the patient changes, you've got to replace the socket. The componentry usually has a 3 to 5 year lifespan, but there's a lot of componentry that will not hold up in Ukraine because it's just not meant to. Multi-articulated hands as a whole break all the time. And you just don't fit random ones off the shelf because they walk out the door and then 2 weeks later it's going to be broken. That was one of the problems when I came a year and a half ago, is we fit all these patients, they go 6-8 hours away, and if they need some kind of adjustment, there's nobody to do it. And then the thing sits in the corner. So maintenance is a big issue. You have to have a follow-up schedule to get these patients back. I talked to the group over at Superhumans. Are you bringing any of these patients that were first seen back in just for some adjustments or checkups? No. So it's things that we have to implement going forward to make sure these patients, long term, what we fit is working for them and it's useful.
So almost that could even be a suggestion of one of the screening criteria needs to be, you need to be able to come back here on a monthly basis or bi-monthly basis, someone who can commit to that so that we don't have a device that goes unused, because it's an investment, a resource, not only the technology and the equipment, but then also someone fitting you, right? We need to be able to follow that over time, and we don't want you to get fitted and then it sits in the corner.
Absolutely, right? And this would be somebody, if wants to do a study, for outcomes, this would be a great opportunity for somebody to jump in and start getting data to prove long-term use and wear of these devices in a wartime event.
Besides working with Superhumans, so it sounds like that's something that you're frustrated about, that they're not necessarily following up with patients that they've fitted. And if you saw regular return visits from those patients, that would be a lot better outcome for you all, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the outcomes are based on how long you're wearing it. So, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 months, a year. We've got patients now that have probably been wearing these devices since December. Right? Nobody's seen them.
I mean, one thing that One thing that I would say that like there is the clinical assessment that is lacking. They do keep regular tabs on just general checkup with the patient on are you using the device and not. That's okay. But they do that. But of course the clinical bit is missing because we send the prosthetist there, and then when the prosthetist goes back to the States, then who's going to do the assessment. So the clinical bit is missing, but they do callbacks every 3 months, I believe, to ensure that patients are using the device.
Can I ask you a question? You said that the outcome is to keep in touch with the people who, well, basically went through rehabilitation as superhumans and etc. I do see that you have a lot of media faces like Ruslana and other people who are constantly in touch with superhumans, but you mean in broader, right?
In broader, everywhere. Yeah.
So could that be related to the fact that these people do not want to maintain contact with superhumans and they maybe leave the country and go abroad and...
I'm not aware of what's going on. It's just something I really noticed. When I was there, I asked a few questions, like, you know, we have fit a few of these, and every one of the groups that are gone in has been different, and we all have our own techniques and our own ways to do things. So just a matter of getting some other patients back. We were talking the last time, the next time I go in is bring some of those patients back so we can make sure things are going well for them. But it's you know, it's an ongoing expense and time to wear these as well, you know, but the country and donors are donating a lot of money for this to be ongoing. So we want to make sure it's being used correctly.
Exactly. And how many people are there in the superhumans team? Do you know? Like the...
Including the prosthetists that have been coming in, or just the... I mean, I don't know about the lower limb. I think there's probably 8 or 10 of them. There's three upper limb, yeah.
Wow. Well, well, to me it seems like the capacity does not, you know, meet the demand of the whatever is going on, and there has to be like a separate department that keeps in touch with, I think, well, in my opinion.
I agree.
I believe Superhumans did about 130 of them when I was there in the summer. Now, I think one of the problems is the administration are kind of trying to get as many patients in and not thinking about the follow-up. But I think once the problem gets larger, they'll figure it out. Another bigger problem that we actually have is, you know, in the beginning of the war, a lot of the amputees were coming to America. And they're getting fitted there, getting 2 weeks of rehab, and shipped back here. And whenever they had a problem, they would call back, but they're going to say, well, we don't have the funds to bring you back because we have these other guys flying in who they're looking for a prosthesis. So I don't know if you've had that problem also, but...
Yeah, I mean, there's been several groups in the U.S. that brought patients over, families over. But yeah, I mean, I saw that here. One of the patients went to the U.S., came back, and he wasn't wearing his prosthesis. So
I'm just wondering if it's a negotiation point with your partnership with Superhumans and others, that it's something, you guys don't have infinite resources and infinite hands to supply. It's something that in your partnership with them that you might be able to say, we need to prioritize those that can come back. Is that something that you guys will be able to?
Something we're hopeful to work on going forward. That's one of the reasons why I left my job in the U.S. to come over here and try to help, because there's so much lacking, especially in the upper limb part. There's techniques and there's ways of doing things that work better for certain patients, and unless you're working with a lot of patients, you're not going to learn those. And you have to have a broad scale of what you're doing in order to fit the vast majority of these patients. They're very highly technical patients, difficult to fit, very active, want to go back to the war, you know, they want to go back to work, if they're working in the fields, or they want to be machine operators again. These are very demanding jobs that you have to have some skill and some ability to fit a wide range of patients. So hopefully I can start training people here to begin that in very specialized form, because lower limb is way different. You know, it's easy to do a lower limb prosthesis, get them up and walking, and they're out the door. It's a lot more harder with a couple degrees of freedom that we add in with mechanical heavyweight things that require batteries and stuff like that. So it is an unusual process, way different upper versus lower.
Yeah, probably lower limb prosthetists will argue that point, but You know,
I've been doing it forever. So.
lower limb as well? Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, to your point about there is donors and there's money invested on these systems, and you want to make sure that, I mean, we're not even sure that that works on the US or Europe, right? So we have to be a bit careful here, because you might want to require an outcome that is not available elsewhere with low resources, without prosthesis being not fitted properly, without the proper OT, you know. So if anything, these upper limb high-end prosthetic hands are almost bound to fail at a higher percentage than in US and Europe in way on the outcomes, because if the patients were not trained properly, they were not fitted properly. We already know there's not like a huge difference between conventional 1 degree of freedom electric prosthesis and a multi-articulated hand. And a lot of that you mentioned, you know, if you receive it earlier, you're going to stick with it a little bit longer. There are studies in Sweden with pediatrics where they want to give them as soon as possible, and then they will tend to use it more. So it is an ongoing process. So I think if we right now we look at the rate of abandonment or outcomes, I don't think they're going to be great, because
I actually think you're
because of the lack of resource. I mean, we're just talking about they don't. A lot of these patients, they don't get OT.
I guess it depends on where these patients are going. If you're going to a single clinic that doesn't have OT, PT built into it long term, they probably will abandon it. But if you do it correctly and you have the rehab built into the process, we've got some data that shows that these patients are using these grips.
How many clinics have that? So that's the point. So like if you only look at superhumans, there might be, but if you take the whole country, that's not going to be the case.
I think you have to start somewhere.
Sure, but going on the hierarchy of priorities, looking for outcomes at this stage is dangerous if you're not properly fitting those prostheses. I mean, you might do it at superhumans, but if the government says and goes and says, okay, we're going to pay the high end, the 50,000, 60,000 prostheses, but if we don't get this, we want, and then the centers don't have.
Well, the government does a very similar thing though, because they ask the patient to come back and demonstrate their prosthesis, and they have to do it by video and send it in, that they've actually fit the prosthesis, it works, it functions for them. So they're doing some of that.
It's not an actual outcome, but
yeah.
So one thing that I just heard through this discussion, and maybe one possible suggestion or recommendation, and one problem, right, is these are expensive devices. In some cases, we don't know what happens to them. There's not sufficient follow-up. There's so many people that are coming, it's more of a consideration of just getting them fitted. And because they can break down within 3 to 5 years, maintenance is critical, and it's a waste of resource if we don't have regular follow-up, and could be something that we really push on superhumans and unbroken, where these are being fitted more numerously as a potential criterion for outside companies that are working with them, and that does not require government involvement, but really just about your own way to make sure that we're continuing to improve these devices, we're continuing to follow up with the patients and continue to improve their lives, and we can scale up more if they're all continually in use rather than being in a corner.
I just want to iterate again that these are really unique patients. They're not the patient that's diabetic, that sits in a chair, loses their arm or limb. These are patients that are actively involved. I've seen them do more things than I ever thought they would do on 2 legs, just within days. Most traumatic amputations happen in the ages of 12 to 24, young men. This is just like that. So you have to have specialized care for them because they're going to break it. You have to have follow-up because they're going to do something outgrow it, change it, do whatever they're going to do to survive. And if it's not working for them, it's not working.
How we doing?
We're doing good. Is anybody that has not spoken have any questions or comments?
What do you see as the biggest need? Since you have a prosthetic center, is it? And you
Yes.
have the rehabilitation as well.
As well, yes.
Do you speak with surgeons?
Of course.
Okay, so you have the surgery and the fitting and the. So what is the biggest need for your?
The process, how it works with us, we, of course, cannot afford as great things that you do, guys, because government is covering our products. So what we do also, that's just like I said, like we rent apartments for guys because we bring from all over Ukraine, civilians and military. We are, it's just the daily basis needs. We feed them, we take them out, we take care of if they are with families, then of course families are with them in apartments. All the apartments are made for them to, everything is easy. We always have the same apartments. We have about 40 people a month. And biggest needs, it's like simple things like helping us, different organizations are, like, because just like I said, I'm volunteer as well. I'm very active in Kherson front line. And I work with some other organizations who is also like today have, for example, a huge amount of toilet paper. So of course I'm sharing it.
So your prosthetists are well trained. They're experienced prosthetists and your
it's everything
rehabs.
in us.
They all how they were trained in Ukraine? Were they trained abroad? How did they get the know-how?
Say it again?
Where did they learn it? Where did they get their experience?
Just like I said, our organization is working for 7 years now.
Okay.
And most of the specialists are in the business for 30 years and so. And we always also go to Germany for study because.
What would you need to treat twice as much patients as you do now?
Well, we are in the process of having a big center in Kyiv. We are working on it. So probably in the beginning of next year, we are going to have a big. We're going to have a big center, and that's where we need really big help, because we need all the equipments. We will need. Like everything for the center, because it's going to be like four level center with lots of rooms for rehabilitation. Just like I said, we're also making shoes, orthoses, and all the materials and all the how you call those machines and stuff like that.
So there's enough prosthetists, there's enough therapists. You will be able
We also always getting, just like I said, like some guys want to stay with us and work with us. So of course they are learning with us, then we send them to, now we have opportunity to Germany for them to study, and it's, of course it's better to study here.
But isn't that prosthetist a certified profession in Ukraine?
Of course.
Yeah, so they get their.
Yes.
So where do they get their education then?
They get the certificate
with your
here.
center?
Yeah.
So you can have a practical education within the center and certify your own prosthetist, or you send them to study somewhere?
Yeah. So they get certificate where at the place where they are studying. So
Okay,
for example, if they go to Germany, they get certificate in Germany. If they study here, then they get certificate here.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something from my side. Is it working? Yeah, as Dhruv said, we were visiting various hospitals in recent days. So from the patient's perspective, we noticed they are very highly motivated. So there were situations just they almost locked us in the room and didn't want to let us out because they wanted so much this help, this hands. They wanted, after testing this, they wanted to sign up right away to be on the waiting list on this hand. So in general, dropout rate of using prosthetic hands is around 40%. So 40% of patients, unparalleled patients, stopping using prosthetic devices. There are many studies, right? But this is one of them. Yeah. Yeah, but for example, in superhumans, over 90% of the patients using prosthetic devices in longer period.
No, this is not clinical follow-up. So, as I said, they don't do clinical follow-ups because lack of prosthetists, but they do follow-ups on like general well-being checkup. Are they using the device? So this is quality general well-being as well as like are you using the device and stuff. So, but there is no quantitative data that. Sorry.
Can you know if your hand, so the co-op system, for instance, they know,
Yeah.
so can you know if your hand's still being used
Yes,
months?
so we have the entire digital platform set up in such a manner that we track a bunch of data associated with device usage, like number of grips, grip switching, proportional control, all those kinds of things. And from December onwards, we will have this working for superhumans as well, because we just need to have it in the Ukrainian language as well, on the web app and the mobile application side.
And then you will know
So we'll
if
have
they
actual
continue, like the
quantitative data
dropout.
starting
And,
from
yeah.
January next year.
Cool.
There is a big control about that, if they're using it or not, if this is working or not. Social workers are calling to the person and following up, like if everything is okay, if they're happy with the service, and if there is any issues, if there is any questions, they get back to us and saying like, your client said this and that, you have to take care of it. It's always under control. Well, social workers, well, this is, first of all, we do it because like we're not as big as superhumans, and we are able to do individual treatment. So like every person, like I would love to share with you guys how they cry and they say that they don't want to leave. This is so good to be with us. This is one thing, but there is also social workers that have to do that, and they do it, and it's like, as of today, it's like there is a lot of organizations like us, and they have to. The social work works for you or for the government.
So if the social worker works for the government, then shouldn't every center?
Okay, the government is covering amount of like the government is paying for it, so they have to make sure that the client got what they need and everything is working and the person is happy, because they're spending money. So this is how it was supposed to be.
I just got the impression that there was no follow-up.
No, there is. It has to be. And it works. I mean, like, because
so there is follow-up. So follow-up is not an issue then.
There is a follow-up with the social worker who is calling and checking, is everything working? Yes, okay. But there is not enough follow-up from the facility, because they have no time just to be more individual.
Well, it's the difference between follow-up kind of on a almost case management sort of style versus a clinical follow-up. These are the two topics we're talking about, and both are needed.
Well, because with our organization, it's very important for us that we are not only following up, especially with the military guy. We have to socialize them. We have to make sure that they know where to go. We have to make sure that they have people around, like they are, so they are not alone, because what happens, there is a lot of people who is at the hospital and they don't even want to go to see specialists because they are depressed. I mean, they cannot accept that they have no leg or they have no hand anymore. And we have lots of cases there is no legs at all. Like, I mean, and we're taking even difficult cases when even superhuman said no because it's a lot of work and they don't want to deal with it, and we work with it. I would love to share it with you as well.
So what I'd like to suggest as we're starting to near the end of our 2-hour session here is that Thomas has been furiously taking notes of everything that we're saying here, and also we've got some summaries of some potential actions and recommendations of the things that we've been describing. Thomas, you want to scroll up a little bit and we kind of, oh, that's right. Alexi, can we scroll up to the top of this section? Yes, thank you. And then, so why don't we read through here and see if these resonate with our conversation, and if these are accurate. I don't know if these are yours or if this is the AI that did some of the action items. And of these, either we can slim down some of them, or we can elaborate on them further or clarify. Thompson, can I hand you the mic and you can kind of walk us through them?
Yeah, so I'll admit straight off the bat, the summary is definitely from ChatGPT, because I just wrote like 3 pages. But we'll start with the beginning. Advocate for a government-level initiative to interlink the prosthetics fitting process with rehabilitation programs. I think that was the first point that went through. Encourage collaboration between prosthetic manufacturers, occupational therapists, and physical therapists to ensure holistic patient care. Import more specialists to train local teams on how prosthetics fitting and rehabilitation should work in tandem. Develop a digitalized tracking platform for OTs, PTs, and prosthetic devices to improve coordination and follow-up care. Establish centralized centers for prosthetics and rehabilitation services to improve efficiency and reduce costs. Develop standardized guidelines for treating amputees to bridge the gap between NGOs and professional prosthetics experts. I think this can be removed because we have the ISPO, correct? Wait. Sorry? I think they still need to be adapted for Ukraine. Oh, adapted for Ukraine, okay. Yeah. I would work with ISPO, which is currently missing in Ukraine, and other organizations to create recommendations and share best practices for prosthetic fitting and rehabilitation. Encourage local institutions and universities to bring in international specialists to train Ukrainian teams, particularly in prosthetics fitting and follow-up care. Ensure prosthetic fitting teams receive hands-on training and shadowing opportunities to scale up capabilities. Advocate for public-private partnerships to make better use of donated equipment and prevent underutilization. I think this is actually an error. It was a statement that USAID said. Yeah, I don't think it's just the AI. Sorry. Ensure the fitting process takes into account patients' occupational lifestyle needs, including functionality for specific job requirements. I think this is a repetitive, actually. Sorry. I should have cleaned this up before. Sorry. Implement a follow-up care schedule and prosthetic maintenance and adjustment to prevent equipment abandonment and ensure long-term success. Work with USAID and Ukrainian government to promote the integration of prosthetics and rehabilitation in national healthcare plans and support regional rehab hospitals. Attend WHO cluster meetings and actively engage with large NGOs to influence decision-making and collaboration on prosthetic care. Address the lack of upper limb prosthetic fitting specialists by increasing training and capacity building initiatives for these highly specialized prosthetics. I think this is repetitive as well. And ensure that follow-up, yeah, that's also repetitive. Okay, sorry. That's all.
So just my question to everyone here, is that a fair summary of all the things that we covered? Or, okay, good. I mean, thank goodness for AI. So what I suggest now is hopefully everyone is in on the WhatsApp group, right? That community. And the idea for us all is to let's continue, right? We're not going to solve all these today. It's just good to just identify them, right? But for us then to use these as a starting point as we continue to follow up and as we use the WhatsApp as a channel for collaboration amongst us and for us to bring others into the conversation for the different organizations, maybe Max, that you're associated with, to invite them into the conversation. The ISPO who's not here, right, doesn't exist, to forge those connections and for us to be able to start then thinking, okay, of these, which ones do we then prioritize and who would raise their hand to step forward and start to attack these. But even just to gather these, summarize them, and put them in the community for us all to collectively solve in, I think is a win. So thank you for being so active today and in this session. And no, you may not get a copy. Yes. This will be obviously in our WhatsApp, and we will share all these with everyone so that we can work together to solve more issues. Thank you. Any other final comments before we wrap? If not, then what we will do is we'll head back downstairs for our closing, and it'll be helpful to hear all the other sessions like this today, right? We had 3 up here, and we had 3 downstairs. We'll hear summaries of each of those in our closing as we end our summit. So thank you. We'll head downstairs.